Proceeding will start shortly. The 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 proceeding will start shortly.
Okay. Final countdown. Order, order. Catherine McKinnell to move the motion.
Thank you. I beg to move that this House has considered petition 597715, which calls on the government to require schools to introduce a 3-day weekend. And it's an honour to serve under your chairmanship, Ms Rees. And the petition we're debating today argues that children can have a lot of stress at school due to exams and homework, and with a 3-day weekend, children could have longer time to relax. When we received this petition in Parliament, and I saw how fast it attracted over 100,000 signatures, my first thought was, what lies underneath this request? So I set about finding out, and we arranged informal discussions with teachers, healthcare professionals and young people to help inform our debate today. And one message that came across loud and clear from everyone that I spoke to was the state of our children's mental health post-lockdown. Teachers told us that children are finding it difficult to make it through the school week, and pupils said they found coming to school difficult and struggled to make it all the way to Friday. We know that from April to September 2021, over 337,000 under-18s were referred to child and adolescent mental health services. That's up a staggering 81% from the same 3 months in 2019. And that compares to only an 11% rise in referrals for adults aged over 19 and above. So it's clear that the pandemic has had a significant impact on our young people's mental health. One teacher I spoke to, who'd worked in some of the most disadvantaged parts of the North East, said she'd never experienced anything comparable to the pandemic in terms of the ongoing mental health impact on her pupils. As part of our outreach, the Petitions Committee ran a survey. Most of the young people that responded expressed strong support for a 4-day school week as a solution to the stress and anxiety that many are facing. One said, "If Fridays were part of the school weekend, I would feel so relieved and happy as I could get a longer break from the stress, from the peer pressure, from the bullying, and it would allow a bit more me time, as some would call it." Another one told us, "I had to take GP recommended mental health days off at one point from school because I found the days then that I was at school, I was more focused and I was ready to learn and excited to learn and felt more positive about my education in general. Another found school to be an inherently stressful place and quite distressingly said, right now, when I walk through the gates of school, I get itchy skin and the bottom of my jaw goes bumpy from the stress. It was really heartbreaking to hear some of the anxieties that many children have around going to school, because our schools should be places to learn about the world, to socialise, to develop in a whole variety of ways, and that many children have such fear about going to school really should be a concern for us all. How much can a child learn if they are stressed and anxious to the degree that clearly some of these young people are? But I have to say, I worry about the proposal to reduce the number of days that children spend in school, and that would not be the right solution. And I know I'm not the only one from the conversations I've had, and I'm going to set out the reasons why. I would worry that it wouldn't address the root cause of the problems that many students are concerned about, whether that's bullying, peer pressure, harassment on social media, or problems keeping up with their schoolwork. And I fear it would simply increase the pressure on young people on their remaining days in school. Without wider changes to our education system, children would just have to learn the same curriculum and prepare for the same exams, but in less time, with just 4 days instead of 5. I'm also acutely aware of the impact a 4-day week could have on the country's most marginalised children. For some children, school is the only place, quite frankly, that they get a decent meal. Or it provides them with respite from what might be a difficult situation at home. And the idea of taking that away from them fills me with concern, and I know it's a concern for many teachers too. So while I can't support moving to a 4-day school week, we cannot ignore this petition as a cry for help. Many children and young people are still recovering from the emotional trauma of the last 2 years, dealing with a collapse in mental health support, and attending schools that, with all the demands of the curriculum, some are clearly struggling to find the time and the support to look after their well-being. So, to gather more in-depth evidence, I spoke to a group of Year 7s and Year 8s at a school in Newcastle. I wanted to hear firsthand what the school week felt like for them, and if they thought that this call for a 3-day weekend would help. Their feedback was so helpful, and I'm so grateful to all the young people who engaged and contributed so thoughtfully, and the staff that helped to facilitate it. At the beginning of the session, both groups were asked to indicate, I asked them, with a show of hands, whether they thought shortening the school week to 4 days was a good idea. In the Year 7 group, every single one of them put their hand up and agreed with the petitioners. Amongst the Year 8s, however, the proposal wasn't so popular, and only about half supported it. At the end of the session, I asked both groups what they thought again, and I'll come back and tell you how their views changed. What came out most strongly from our discussion was just how tired pupils feel by the end of the school week. And many thought that a 4-day week would be a really sensible solution to just feeling less tired. Others argued that since they were so tired and unproductive by the end of the week, that an additional day off wouldn't actually affect their performance at school, because instead they would have more time to rest and recover and be more productive on their days in school. One pupil just said, by Friday, I'm so tired, something I'm sure many adults can associate with as well. But others argued that they had to spend most of Saturday recovering from the school week, then they would do their homework on Sundays, so the 2-day weekend just didn't give them much of a break. One respondent to our survey said, some weekends I can't even fit homework in, which requires me to have to wake up extra early in the morning or stay up extra late at night to get it done, and that leaves me exhausted the next day. It feels like a never-ending cycle and I'm drowning in responsibilities. This is from a child. When the pupils were asked what they would do with their extra day off, some said they would enjoy enriching activities like painting and drawing, while others would play outside. Some did admit, when challenged, that they might end up spending more time on their mobile phones. And the teachers we spoke to suspected that late-night phone use and gaming does contribute to some of the tiredness as much as school does. But I was hugely impressed by how deeply the Newcastle pupils thought about this proposal. And as the discussion in the classroom progressed, there was a clear shift in both groups, as they reasoned that the increasing the weekend would have that knock-on effect on the school week. And there was a realisation that Monday to Thursday would become really intense and rigidly academic. Teachers would have to cover the same curriculum in fewer days, and they might be forced to drop some of the activities that the children enjoy. Some Year 8 said the need to cram everything into 4 days would actually cause more stress. So I really worry that the proposal for a 4-day week, it wouldn't address the issues of stress and anxiety, and in fact it could actually add to them. And we do have some evidence of this, because while there have been no significant experiments with a 4-day week in this country, it has become common in some parts of the United States. The National Conference of State Legislators estimates that around 560 districts in 25 states have allowed at least one of their schools to adopt a 4-day school week. More than half of these districts are in just 4 states: Colorado, Montana, Oklahoma, and Oregon. But the shift hasn't reduced the length of time that pupils spend at school. Teachers have made up for the lost day by adding extra time to other days, or more rarely by shortening the school holidays. And as the Colorado Sun reports, since the North Cuyahoga School District switched to a 4-day week last year, teachers cut out the chill afternoons when kids would watch movies, have free time that sometimes fill the space between maths and art class. It's bell-to-bell learning. I know that schools in this country already find covering the curriculum almost impossible as it is. For example, one of the issues that the Petitions Committee is looking at is water safety. 277 people in the UK lost their lives in water accidents last year, and campaigners have told us that it could be prevented with some very basic water safety knowledge. Water safety is part of the school curriculum, and it's supposed to be taught in every school, but it's just not happening. The teachers we spoke to said that they have to spend a great deal of time helping children to learn social and emotional skills, things the education system presumes are already there. One teacher at a disadvantaged primary told us, "All I'm teaching in reception is basic parenting." If the school week and the curriculum and school funding allowed for more enrichment activities that would develop those social and other skills, it would make school more fun, less tiring for children and young people, and it would also help teachers that are feeling overwhelmed, that they're able to support with those better learning outcomes. Some of the pupils suggested reconfiguring the school week to have more spaced out breaks. They said it could look like something like, and they didn't label it as this, but the French model, where there's time up on Wednesdays to space out breaks a little more. Or perhaps when we're at university, you get Wednesday afternoons for sport. Others wanted optional clubs on the day off, where they could go into school for half a day and use it for sport and social activities, a bit of breathing space in the middle of the week. And I remember when Alan Shearer, the famous Newcastle footballer, opened the current sport at Gosforth Centre at Gosforth Academy. And he gave a speech, and I hope I'm not putting words in his mouth, but it left quite an impression on me, that he didn't particularly enjoy the academic side of school, but what got him up every morning and got him there was the promise that he would get to play football. And so we do need to make sure that every child gets to do something that they love at school. Because if you love it, it's generally because you're good at it. And if you're good at it, it builds your confidence in other areas of your education. Another problem with reducing the school week is that it could disproportionately impact on children from more disadvantaged backgrounds, which would exacerbate the existing inequalities in our education system. Parents and carers would be required to either look after their children or find someone else to, particularly in the case of younger children, and we know the challenges around childcare for a lot of families. One parent told us, "I know many children rely on school as a lifeline for food, respite from difficult home environments, and for childcare for working parents who have low-paid work." And more than half the pupils that responded to our survey said they would spend significant time on their extra day off taking part in activities such as music or arts or learning another language. Likewise, parents told us they would pay to supplement their child's learning, to participate in clubs, take them on educational visits, do outdoor learning, or pay for them to have other lessons. My concern, though, is that children from more disadvantaged backgrounds would just miss out on those opportunities because families have fewer resources to deliver them. Within schools, children have access to the same learning resources and the same learning environment. And although disadvantage still plays an outsized role in determining educational outcomes, I do believe that schools are a really important space to try and level that and level up, if you like, for every young person. But I'm especially concerned about the potential impact on the most disadvantaged, including those with the special educational needs and children with extremely difficult home lives. One pupil told us that their autistic brother, she said that she would like to have the extra day off, but she worried about her autistic brother because his default behaviour is not to leave the house unless he must. She said she would go to the park on her extra day off, but an extra day at home for her brother would just be another day with no one to talk to. And while 83% of pupils told us they would spend Fridays with family, we know particularly from the explosion in post-lockdown safeguarding disclosures that many parents would be at work 5 days a week, so it potentially just adds to the challenge of finding childcare and making sure children are safe. For others, home just isn't a happy place to be. So with less time at school, I worry that more safeguarding opportunities would be missed. One teacher told us that for some of her pupils, a school meal is sometimes the only meal they get, asking, if we take that day away from them, are we confident they will get fed at home? So when I asked the pupils what they thought about the 4-day week, for the second time, after discussing all these issues, the results were quite different. Every Year 7 pupil who supported it at first, having thought about it and discussed it, they were all against it in the end. Year 8s who had been less supportive initially were even less so by the end, with just one pupil sitting on the fence. And if I'm honest, I think those young people made the right call. For the reasons I've outlined, I can't personally support the petitioner's call to reduce the school week, but I hope the Minister has heard the case made by the almost 150,000 people, many of them who will be young people at school, who have signed this petition. And I hope he will give their views full and proper consideration when he responds. And I also think we have to engage with the concerns that lie beneath this petition. We've discussed children and young people's mental health in this House many times, but for me, the virtual collapse of CAMS, the Child and Adult Mental Health Services, is very much the elephant in the room. The number of children and young people on CAMS waiting lists soared over the pandemic. I mentioned this earlier, but the wheels came off long before that. The tragic reality is that more and more young people with incredibly serious mental health issues are being turned away and told they don't meet the required thresholds. The Guardian reported earlier this year that one actively suicidal child who'd been prevented from jumping off a building earlier that day was told they couldn't be assessed by the crisis CAMS team unless their GP submitted a written request. In another part of the country, a preteen boy was found with a ligature in his room, yet the absence of any marks around his neck meant the referral criteria had not been met because it did not appear that he had tried to take his own life. I know there isn't a single CAMS employee who wants things to stay this way, and I know they care deeply about CAMS and children and young people's mental well-being. They're trying to do their best with what they've been given, but we need to invest in child mental health services. Chair, I know the government doesn't agree with the petitioner's call for a 4-day school week either, because they have written to say so, but I do hope that the Minister will look at this. Children and young people have faced significant challenges as a result of the pandemic, and we're now living through a crisis in mental health that cannot be ignored. It's abundantly clear that the support available in schools and the NHS isn't sufficient to meet the demand. So we need a proper plan to change that. We need to fund a full-time member of staff in every secondary school whose job it is to support pupils' mental health and stop things escalating. Primary schools must be able to access specialist support in their area, and we need an expansion of our mental health workforce and guarantees that young people can access support for their mental health in the more severe cases in a timely way, within a month at the very latest. We also need to not only treat the symptoms of poor mental health in young people, but to address the causes, including an intensely pressurised curriculum that leaves less time to develop the other broader skills and for children to do the things that they love. It's no criticism of teachers and support staff, because I know that they're working incredibly hard to deliver an incredibly dense curriculum within constrained budgets and timeframes. And that's why the system must find the breathing space for children and young people to just be able to do a bit more of what they love, to do a bit more of what gives them a spring in their step as they go to school each morning. And as our children recover from the traumatic experience of the last 2 years, we need to support schools to be able to deliver enriching activities, to build in time for children to socialise and learn new skills, from music, drama, sports, outdoor activities. Something for everybody, I think, we have to be able to offer within school. And if we're genuinely looking to level up and help people to improve on their life chances, which surely has to be the purpose of our education system, then let's not reduce it to 4 days. Let's make the 5 more enriching and more fun.
Thank you. The question is that this House has considered E-petition 597715 relating to the school week. I call Opposition Spokesperson Stephen Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Ms Rees, and I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend for Newcastle upon Tyne North for bringing this petition debate to the Chamber today and introducing it to us. My honourable friend spoke powerfully about a number of issues of shared concern: the impact of the pandemic on children's mental health, the anxiety and stress some children face in going to school, and the need to ensure school works for everyone, how a 4-day week may increase pressure on children, and how the reduction in school days could disadvantage children from poorer backgrounds. And may I take this opportunity to thank my honourable friend for the engagement that she has done with a number of children more broadly, to understand their views and concerns as part of her committee's work, including the solutions to the issues that have been raised. Chair, I understand that the petition has been mainly coordinated by children, so I want to take a moment to applaud their campaigning efforts and their dedication to raising the issues that matter to them. Their voice is not always heard in this place, and unfortunately on this occasion I cannot give them exactly what they want, but their petition raises some important issues that I would like to address. First, Labour believes that the best place for children to learn is in the classroom with their friends, and though the impact of the pandemic still looms large on absence rolls and entertainment, the majority of children are now back in the classroom on a regular basis. Given the 2.5 school years of unprecedented disruption and pupils have experienced, with millions of days of school missed and a lack of access to extracurricular activities, I don't think parents or the wider economy would thank me if the Labour Party were to advocate for a shorter school week, which would mean losing a further 38 days per year. Chair, we know that those who spent the most out of schools during the pandemic will have suffered the greatest disadvantage. We also know from the Children's Commissioner's recent report that the majority of children have missed their friends and value those relationships. And we know how important these relationships are for well-being. After honing the skills that they would have needed throughout their lives, ministers have announced a 32.5-hour school week as part of their white paper and subsequent schools bill. But this is business as usual for most schools. 8 out of 10 are already delivering it. And the reality is those that don't are so close that it will add only minutes. But there are ways we can enrich the school day without being prescriptive about its length. Both the Education Policy Institute and the Education Endowment Foundation have said that delivering a range of extracurricular activities, from arts to music to academic to pastoral support, should be a critical part of any lost learning recovery plans. Chair, as you will well be aware, in Wales, the Labour government is seizing this initiative. They are running a fully funded national trial which guarantees 5 hours enrichment activities for children per week. It may be small in scale, but it's big in ambition. Activities include art, music and sport, as well as sessions linked to core academic skills like reading. The schools involved volunteer to take part in order to support disadvantaged learners and improve access to social and cultural opportunities following the pandemic. Now, a couple of months ago, I travelled to Neath to visit a school taking part in the trial. Although we arrived as the school day was ending, the halls were buzzing with activity. I met students who had done a cookery class, making spaghetti, cookies and even pizza in a mug. And I met a pupil called Ben who was carefully sculpturing a small clay pot. He eagerly explained to me that he'd never done anything like this before. And around the room was a series of other creations where things were coming to life. So Welsh Labour's investment in children's futures is filling these classrooms with knowledge, with creativity and excitement. It's for these reasons that extracurricular activities are central to Labour's recovery plan. Our proposals would deliver a fully funded range of extracurricular clubs and activities to boost time for children to learn, play and socialise after months of being away from their friends. So Labour is prioritising the value and experiences children get in school. That delivers genuine enrichment in a way that ministers' arbitrary clock watching doesn't. Chair, now the petition and the associated survey rightly prioritises the importance of mental health and well-being, as my honourable friend mentioned earlier. Children in schools increasingly find themselves on the front line of this silent pandemic. Even before COVID, the NHS suggested as many as 1 in 6 5 to 10-year-olds suffered from mental ill health. But across England last year, 3/4 of children were not seen within 4 weeks of being referred to children's mental health services. Worse still, over a third of children were turned away from mental health services despite a referral from a professional. On this government's watch, waiting times have exploded, whilst availability of treatment has plummeted. And that's why Labour's Children's Recovery Plan prioritises a mental health professional delivering quality support for children in every school. Chair, the current school week is also important in the context of childcare, which I know will be a problem facing many families across the country. Childcare is critical for learning and development. It's also intrinsically linked to our wider economic prosperity. But the cost of living crisis means parents are increasingly priced out of care. Pre-pandemic, children on free school meals arrived at school almost 5 months behind their peers. Spiralling costs will also make this worse. The average cost of a full-time nursery place for a child under 2 has risen by almost £1,500 over the last 5 years. In fact, the United Kingdom is one of the highest childcare costs as a proportion of average income. At 29%, we are 19% higher than the OECD average. This is perpetuating a gross inequality that is holding women back. 1.7 million are prevented from taking on more hours of paid work due to childcare issues. We lose £28.2 billion in economic output every year as a result, and it contributes to the farcical situation in which young families' income would actually be higher if they remain on universal credit than if they were both back in work and paid for childcare. And of course, it's more punitive on single parents. Chair, changing the length of the school week means these parents will find childcare solutions even more challenging. That is not a cost we are reasonably asked them to bear, but we need wider action to tackle the cost of childcare, which was rising even before the cost of living crisis. The latest bright idea to cut the number of adults looking after groups of children will likely reduce the quality of provision and will likely have no impact on the availability or affordability. That's why Labour's Children's Recovery Plan includes investment in childcare places for young children on free school meals. And because we know that childcare pressure doesn't stop when children start school, we'd be investing in before and after school clubs for children, as I said earlier. Chair, finally, I want to briefly mention the wider and urgent problem of persistent absence. The Children's Commissioner's report recently found that 22% of pupils were persistently absent in autumn 2021. Labour welcomes the long overdue proposed register of children not in school and wants to see it implemented without further delay. But this treats the symptom, not the problem. Ministries should properly address post-pandemic learning and development, provide the mental health and wellbeing support that is needed, and slow but a bit more curiosity about why such a large proportion of those persistently absent are pupils with special educational needs or disabilities and those who are disadvantaged. Addressing the structural challenges that mean these children aren't in school should be an important part of the government's approach. Fining parents will work in some cases, but many others will see it as a punitive and regressive approach, which could mean children are lost in the system for good. Chair, removing a day of school a week is not the solution to challenges children and parents face. Instead, as I've said, we must restore the support children and parents need so that pupils thrive in school. That is Labour's plan, because after 2.5 school years of disruption, that is exactly what they deserve. Thank you.
Minister Robin Walker.
Thank you, Ms Rees. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And firstly, I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Newcastle North for opening this debate and the way in which she did so as well. I think it was fantastic to hear the way she engaged with pupils and students in her own constituency and listened to them, but also deploy what we've heard in this debate. I think her powers of persuasive reasoning to conduct that before and after exercise and show that people can be won round to understanding the importance of the school week. And I recognise a large number of people have signed this petition. It raises a number of important issues, and I completely understand how an extended weekend can look on the surface of it very attractive to a lot of people, particularly children in school. However, it is important to recognise how shortening the school week would adversely impact on children in terms of their learning, as well as reducing opportunities to socialise and participate in enrichment activities. And I want to come to that in more detail. This is more crucial than ever in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Overall, reducing time in school reduces children's life chances, and this government therefore has no plans to require schools to close on Fridays. I want to begin by setting out this government's long-term vision for pupils' academic achievements and the importance of being in school to achieve this, and then I want to set out some of the work we're doing to maximise time in school and why this is more important than ever as a result of the pandemic and the challenges children and young people face when out of school. Next, I want to set out the work my department is doing to support our children and young people to recover from the pandemic. And finally, I want to touch upon how more time in school can improve children and young people's mental health and well-being, thus enabling support during more stressful times, such as exams, and also opportunities for enrichment activities. I'm sure this House, this Chamber, would agree with me that schooling is fundamental to a functioning society. School equips children with the knowledge and skills to thrive and flourish later in life. My department recently set out our overarching vision for the school system in the Schools White Paper, Opportunity for All. This included our Levelling Up mission for schools. By 2030, our aim is for 90% of primary school children to achieve the expected standard in reading, writing and maths. In secondary schools, our aim is that the national GCSE average grade in both English language and in maths will increase from 4.5 in 2019 to 5 by 2030. And school life is at the heart of that ambition. This is why, far from seeking to shorten the school week, as the petition proposes, we're committed to delivering a richer, longer average school week, which makes the most effective use of time in school, including not just teaching time, but also enrichment activities, but will help ensure all children enjoy a rounded education. To this end, we recently conducted a review of time in schools, and this found that additional time in school, if used well, can have a positive benefit on pupil outcomes. However, we also know that some pupils currently receive less time in school than others due to differences in opening hours, and this shortfall accumulates over time. It is simply unfair that a child who receives 20 minutes per day less of teaching time loses out on around 2 weeks of schooling a year. And that is why, as set out in the White Paper, we have set an expectation that all mainstream state-funded schools should deliver at least a 32.5-hour week as soon as possible, and by September 2023 at the latest. We believe that 32.5 hours is the current average length of the school week, and I accept the point that, from the Honourable Gentleman, that there are many schools already achieving this. In many respects, that's a good thing, but it shows that it can be achieved within what they have. But by setting this minimum expectation for all schools, we will help ensure that all children have fair access to education, regardless of where they live, to help them achieve their full potential. And the new minimum length of the school week also includes break times, thus allowing children more opportunity for socialisation and enrichment activities, which they missed out on too much during the pandemic. We're also encouraging schools to go beyond 32.5 hours where possible, and Monega Primary School in East London, which is the school at which we launched the White Paper, does this by having an earlier start time at 8:30 a.m. This provides pupils access to 20 minutes a day of intensive reading development on a weekly basis. That equates to 1 hour 40 minutes extra reading time for all their pupils. If schools were to close on Fridays, as the petition proposes, pupils would, by contrast, lose 38 school days on average in each academic year. And given what I've said about the benefits of time in school, I cannot accept that that would be in the best interests of our children, let alone the impact that it would have, and I think which the Honourable Lady rightly raised, on parents as well. The work we are doing to maximise time in school is more important than ever in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. During lockdown, parents often struggled with homeschooling, bringing a new appreciation for the fantastic work that teachers do and the difference that they make in children's lives. And from the Children's Commissioners for England's national survey, The Big Ask, we heard from more than 500,000 children on their impressions of online learning and the return to school. And children spoke out about how much they liked school, how much they missed their peers, and how much they missed schools while the gates were closed. They described feelings of isolation during lockdown, as well as uncertainty around schooling. They also spoke about the importance of education for its own sake. One 11-year-old girl saying, "I really want to learn, even if it's hard, because education is important to me." In addition, education was seen as particularly important by children who faced challenges at school, including children with special educational needs. Over 84% of children reported being happy or okay with school life. The report highlights how attendance in school is crucial for people's education, well-being and long-term development. However, the Children's Commissioner has also expressed her concern that currently we cannot identify where each child is. And we have already announced, as part of the Schools Bill currently before Parliament, local authorities will be required to keep registers of children not in school, so no child can fall through the cracks in the system. And I welcome the Honourable Gentleman for Portsmouth South's support for this. However, I should be clear that we are not legislating on the length of the school week as part of the Schools Bill. That remains a non-statutory expectation for all mainstream state-funded schools. Continuing to help our children recover from the impact of the pandemic remains one of this government's top priorities. Being in school is crucial to ensure that children and young people can receive the support on offer to them. Shortening the current school week would therefore risk jeopardising the strides that children and young people have already made in terms of their progress. Our latest pupil progress data, published at the end of March this year, shows we are seeing some good progress for many pupils. Evidence shows that by autumn 2021, on average, primary pupils had recovered around 2/3 of the progress lost during the pandemic in reading, and around half of the progress lost in maths. However, we know that there is more work to do. We believe that the best way for children and young people to recover from the impact of the pandemic is by investing in what works, and that is why we've invested nearly £5 billion to fund a comprehensive recovery package, including targeted extra funding, teacher training, tutoring and extra education opportunities. Maximising time in school is key to securing the benefits of our recovery package, including investing £800 million to increase hours in 16 to 19 education by 40 hours per student per year from September 2022. The Honourable Lady spoke quite rightly and passionately about mental health, and one of the many valuable aspects of being in school is that it can be a crucial contributor to children and young people's positive mental health and well-being, equipping children and young people to stay mentally and physically well into the future. This is supported by the evidence. Our most recent annual State of the Nation report collated a range of data to identify trends in children and young people's mental health and well-being recovery over the course of the 2020-21 academic year. This report found that reductions in well-being occurred most clearly for both primary and secondary pupils in February 2021, when varied pandemic restrictions were in place, including school closures. The report also found a link between regular attendance at school and college and positive well-being across all groups of children and young people, highlighting the critical benefits of being in school for well-being. School is also a place where emerging problems can be identified and early support given. Although educational staff are not mental health professionals, they are well placed to observe children and young people day to day and identify those whose behaviour suggests that they may be experiencing a mental health issue. We've put in place a wide range of training and guidance to help education staff to identify and understand mental health issues and know how to respond effectively. Our recent £15 million Wellbeing for Education Recovery and Return programmes provided free training, support and resources for staff dealing with children and young people experiencing the additional pressures of COVID-19 and other events, including trauma, anxiety or grief. Around 14,000 schools and colleges across the country benefited from this support, which was delivered through local authorities. We've also recently confirmed an additional £10 million in grants to extend senior mental health lead training to even more schools and colleges. This means it will be offered to 2/3 of all state schools and colleges by March 2023 and all state schools and colleges by 2025. However, I hear the concerns that the Honourable Lady has raised about CAMHS, and I will continue to work with health colleagues to try and ensure that they are addressed. The petition we're debating mentions exams and homework. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
Councillor McKinnell.
I'm grateful that he acknowledges the concerns that I raised, because The training that he is talking about is obviously welcome, and any teacher and education professional will be grateful for the opportunity to be able to identify where there are challenges. What they need, though, are people, experts that they can refer these children to actually work with them and support them. And that clearly has to be a priority for the government, given the explosion in referrals that are required post-pandemic.
Minister.
I absolutely acknowledge that point, and I think were my health colleagues there, they would say it is a priority for the government, but I accept there is more work to do on that front. The petition we're mentioning mentions exams and homework, in particular as sources of stress and anxiety for children and young people. And this government believes that exams and other assessments are an essential part of ensuring young people have acquired the knowledge and skills they need in order to succeed in further study and in later life. Exams are the fairest way of judging pupils' performance, and we know that preparing for them can be motivating for pupils and consolidate learning. However, we're also keenly aware that exams do have the potential to exacerbate feelings of anxiety and stress amongst some young people, and that is why it is important that schools are clear that whilst pupils should be encouraged to work hard and achieve well, this shouldn't be at the expense of their well-being. Schools and colleges should be able to identify signs of exam-related stress whenever it emerges and be in a position to respond appropriately. Teachers are best placed to work with the pupils themselves and their families to respond to signs of stress and access appropriate support. Like exams, we believe that homework is an important part of a good education. Schools have the autonomy to decide whether to set homework and how much of it their pupils must do. Homework that is planned by teachers is an integral part of their curriculum, gives pupils the opportunity to practice and reinforce what they've been taught in class, to help them consolidate and extend the knowledge and understanding they have required. Homework also enables teachers to check pupils' understanding systematically, identifying misconceptions accurately, and provide clear, direct feedback. But I heard the concerns the Honourable Lady raised about children who are working late into the night and sacrificing parts of their weekend, and clearly that would appear to be an excessive approach. We would want schools to balance carefully the needs for children for time to rest and recuperate, as well as the benefits of that. And she said, and quite rightly I think, that schools should be a fun place to be and allow children to do more of what they love. And another reason why children being in school is so important is the enrichment support on offer. We know that participation in enrichment activities, which can support well-being, fell throughout the pandemic. The longer, rich school week proposed in the school's white paper will help to ensure that all pupils have the chance to have a wide range of experiences, and we're developing guidance to support schools to develop a varied and high-quality enrichment offer. Inspiration Trust in Norfolk and North Suffolk is an example of a trust that extends the school week beyond 32.5 hours for all of its secondary schools. Its schools ensure that all additional enrichment sessions are timetabled and mandatory, which ensures equality of participation by pupils from all socio-economic backgrounds. Cultural education, which includes arts, the music and heritage, is a vital part of school activity. We support this via curriculum first and foremost, with arts and music being part of the national curriculum. However, we also want all schools to offer co-curricular and extracurricular activity in these areas. Cultural education is important for the enjoyment these areas bring in and of themselves, for academic progress, for well-being and for increasing life chances and career opportunities in our outstanding cultural and creative sectors and in wider employment. Our newly published plan, National Plan for Music Education, and next year's Cultural Education Plan will help identify opportunities for schools in these areas. And I was very pleased to announce on Saturday the refreshed National Plan for Music Education, co-published by the Department for Education and DCMS. This plan sets out our vision to enable all children and young people to learn to sing, play an instrument, create music together, and have the opportunity to progress their musical interests and talents, including professionally. The plan confirms the government's continued commitment to music education and includes £25 million of new capital to purchase hundreds of thousands of musical instruments and equipment, including adaptive instruments for pupils with special educational needs and disabilities. The plan sets out clear guidance to schools to provide timetable curriculum music of at least 1 hour a week of the school year for key stages 1 to 3, as well as opportunities outside of lesson plan to learn instruments and singing and to play and sing together in ensembles and choirs. We've also committed £79 million of funding for 3 years to music hubs to support schools and others to deliver high-quality music education. Physical education, school sport and physical activity are also an extremely important part of school life. All children and young people should have the opportunity to live healthy, active lives, and this begins with high-quality PE lessons, opportunities to experience a range of sports, and ensuring that children meet the Chief Medical Officer's recommendation of 60 active minutes per day, of which 30 minutes should be within the school day. The Honourable Lady mentioned the inspirational figure of Alan Shearer and how football motivated him to come to school. This is one of the reasons why the government announced in October 21 funding of nearly £30 million a year towards improving and opening up school sport facilities in England, as well as to improve the teaching of PE at primary schools. It's also why we confirmed on Saturday the £320 million primary PE and sport premium will continue for the 22-23 academic year to support primary schools to improve the quality of their PE, sport and physical activity. Finally, it's important to acknowledge the serious impact that this proposal would have on working parents, particularly those with younger children, where childcare arrangements would need to be put in place on Friday. And the Honourable Lady, I know, spoke very well about this in her speech and has also been raising the issue in other debates recently. It would be a significant additional cost for many parents, many of whom are already struggling with the cost of living. And so I'm very grateful to her for providing an opportunity to debate this important issue. It is heartening to see from the petition that so many children are invested in talking about their education. But I think we're in agreement on the outcome of this one. At the heart of this government's vision is ensuring every child and young person can fulfil their potential. The steps we've taken to maximise time in school are key to achieving that vision. But we do not want to reduce the opportunity for young people to be in school, and therefore we have no plans to remove Friday from the school week.
Thank you, Minister. Catherine McKinnell to wind up.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for what is a really thorough response. And I think it's safe to say we all agree that it wouldn't be in the best interests of every child to reduce the school week to 4 days. But I don't think that in any way diminishes the cause of this petition, the voices that have been heard today, and what I really did interpret as a cry for help from young people. And I think that we're in quite a unique time in history, and one that we shouldn't ignore and plough on as though nothing has changed, because I think what young people are asking us to recognise is that things have changed. COVID and the pandemic has changed many aspects of our lives, and I think as adults we've adapted many working practices, we've adapted the way we do things, many people have reassessed their lives and their priorities, and how they want to spend their time and what they want to live for. And I think young people have done the same. And I think I don't think this is young people saying they don't want to be educated. I think it's young people saying we don't want to feel this enormous crushing pressure that I think many of them now feel at school. And another alarming statistic I saw, because I wanted to see, in terms of our education system, how well are we performing? And it's something I've looked at as part of the Education Select Committee, in comparison to other education systems around the world. And what concerns me is that we're performing very highly on one metric that jumped out at me, and that is we're top 5 in the world for girls who feel a crushing fear of failure, and in terms of anxiety levels. And I think it's right that the OECD measure these things. They don't just measure educational output, they also measure how young people feel and their experience and well-being in school. And I think the real challenge for government, and everything that the Minister outlined is positive and encouraging in terms of ensuring we enrich the school day. But I think it is really important that we don't fall down the warren of quantity over quality, and that we make sure that the time that children do spend in school, their well-being as well as their educational attainment is catered for. And I think we cannot ignore the glaring challenge around mental health. And I think it's a general issue that we know many young people are grappling with. The social media world that many of us didn't grow up with, it wasn't in existence when we were children at school. It's something that every young person now grows up with and has to find a way through and manage their mental health, as well as living an online and a real world existence whilst juggling their education as well. But fundamentally, we can't ignore the pandemic and pretend it didn't happen. It's had a significant impact on our children and our young people. And I think if we don't put that additional investment in now and recognise some of the challenges that have emerged from that for this particular cohort of people who were incredibly isolated. And we know other groups in society were, but for children, when you are a child, it's so unnatural to be put in that situation of being away from your friends, away from your family, and away from all the things that you love, that I think the long-term implications are significant, and we should put the investment in place to support them through this period and support generally with mental health and well-being, and prioritise it in the way we assess schools and how they're performing as much as educational outcomes. We have to prioritise happiness and well-being, because ultimately that is how we get better educational outcomes as well. If we have happy, well balanced and mentally well children, they will perform better at school. So we just have to make sure we've got the resources in place. And I absolutely commend the petitioners and everyone that signed it. And I appreciate they may be disappointed they're not getting a 4-day week at the end of this debate, but hopefully what they will be getting is a richer, happier and more well-rounded 5 days at school that will help them to really fulfil their potential wherever they might be in this country.
Thank you. The question is that this House has considered E-petition 597715 relating to the school week. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Bit more enthusiasm perhaps. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sit-in stands adjourned.
Has ended. The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended.